Welcome back, students. In this video, we're going to be reviewing variables from the lens of cause and effect. And we're going to focus specifically on the independent and the dependent variable. So as you encounter data tables and graphs in your lesson, I want you to think about what is the independent variable and what is the dependent and how are they related. So when we look at variables, I like to remind my students to think about them as cause and effect. So when I think of the independent, I think of the cause. And when I think of the dependent, I think of the effect. So let's review, what do we mean by cause? So when we discuss cause, we're really thinking about the reason something happens, right? And it's something that you choose. So it's selected by the experimenter and you manipulate it. Now, when we think of the dependent or the effect, it's the result, right? The data collected, or we like to also refer to it as the responding variable. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read a description of our experiment. And while I'm reading, I would like for you guys to annotate the independent and dependent variable. So you will highlight the independent in yellow and the dependent variable in green. And if you feel like you're up for a challenge, go ahead and circle the constant variables. Plant growth in strawberry plants. This study from 2004 looked at how different types of fertilizers affected the growth of strawberry plants. The growth of the strawberry plants was measured in weight, which is shown in kilograms. The amount of organic fertilizer were measured in tons. The study measured the effect of 3 different kinds of fertilizers: inorganic, which is the type you buy at the store, food waste, compost, or paper waste, recycled paper. So if you haven't done so already, take some time to highlight the independent variable in yellow. In other words, the cause. So what caused the different results? And the dependent variable in green, which is the effect, outcome, results. Those are all different ways to look at dependent. And then when you're done, press play. So now what you're looking at is a visual representation of that data. And if it confirms your annotation, go ahead and jot down your independent, which is your cause, and your identify dependent, which is the effect. However, if after looking at the graph, you want to go back and revisit the text because you might be telling yourself, I don't think I identified those correctly, that's totally fine. Hit pause, go ahead and fix your annotations. And afterwards, you could record your cause, your independent, and your effect, your dependent. All right, so I love doing throwback challenges with my students because it allows you to review content that you've done previously and send a signal to your brain that says, this is important, let's not forget this. So you're going to read a description of a process, and it has to do with strawberries. What a coincidence. And you are to determine if this process that's being described is an example of selective breeding or genetic engineering. And in the third column, you're going to jot down all the clues that made you come to that conclusion. All right, so let's get this started. The flounder is a species of fish that can live in very cold water. The fish produces an antifreeze protein that prevents ice crystals from forming in its blood. The DNA for this protein has been identified. An enzyme is used to cut and remove this section of the flounder's DNA that is then spliced into the DNA of a strawberry plant. As a result, the plant can now produce a protein that makes it more resistant to the damaging effects of frost. This process is known as, so now it is your chance to go and reread and determine if this is an example of selective breeding or genetic engineering. And once you've come to the conclusion, we want you to, in the third column, identify what clues helped you make that decision. When you are done, then you can press play to review as a team the response. All right, guys, it is the moment of truth. We're going to go over the answer. Let's see how much of last unit you remembered. So, if you selected genetic engineering, you are absolutely correct. One of the main clues that made me think right off the bat this has to be genetic engineering is that an enzyme was used to cut and remove a section of the flounder DNA, right? To then be spliced into the DNA of a strawberry plant. And if you could recall from the last unit, that right there is the key step, right? Or represents some key steps in genetic engineering. You want to identify a trait of interest in one organism, right? And you want to then transfer that gene that codes for the trait of interest into a host with the goal that it will have those traits, right? And so this is a perfect example of genetic engineering. And it's really important that we always go back and we always review old content. And that's why I believe in creating opportunities for you guys to review old content so that you don't forget this stuff. So be prepared in future videos to have some throwback challenges to see how much of our previous learnings you remember. With that being said, guys, thank you for joining me in this review of variables, specifically exploring graphs in this lesson. And I will see you next time for more learnings. Take care.